Hello, good morning. Now I would like to presentation about my research proposal. The title is The Correlation Between Motivation and English Speaking Ability of the 8th grade student of SMPN 8 Denpasar in academic year 2024-2025 by Industri Wayuni Delastri NPM 074. Next, chapter 1. In chapter 1, there is 2 points. The first is about research background and the second is research problem. Okay, talk about research background. In research background, I find two researchers. The first researcher is Sela Monica 2021, entitled The Correlation Between Student Motivation and Speaking Ability of the 11th grade student in SMKN 3 Kota Bumi academic year 2020-2021. In her research, she used a speaking test with descriptive monologue, material, and questionnaire to measure motivation. And then the second researcher is Putri Marlinda Yuris, 2020, in the entitled The Correlation Between Student Motivation and Their Speaking Skill of the 8th grade student in MTS and Ramba. In this study, Putri want to know in focus on identify the significant correlation of student motivation in speaking skill using the monologue text. Okay, next, number 2, talk about research problem. Based on what has been explained in the background of the study above, the researcher had researched on the correlation between motivation and speaking ability of the 8th grade student of SMPN 8 Denpasar in academic year 2024-2025. Chapter 2, the first is talk about theoretical review. In theoretical review, there is research variable. In research variable, I have two theory about the first is about motivation. The second is about speaking. Okay, the first theory motivation according to Dorney 201, and the second according to Harmer 207, and then next theory speaking according to Harmer 201, and next according to Cameron 201. Okay, next talk about empirical review. In empirical review, I want to explain about review weakness. Okay, in empirical review, I have two researcher. The first researcher was conducted by Sela Monica 2021. The weakness is the weakness of the research use multiple choice in collecting data. And then the second researcher was conducted by Marlinda Yuris 2020. In about the weakness is the researcher is that the theory of motivation use is not clear and there are not aspects that can be measured to make question in this questionnaire. Okay, still in chapter 2, talk about present study. In this study, researcher will use theory from Uer in 1991. There are 7 characters of student motivation, namely positive task orientation, ego involvement, need or achievement, high inspiration, goal orientation, perseverance, tolerance for ambiguity. Because this theory has clear and complete aspect and explanation is included, then it can be reduced to question in questionnaire to assess student motivation. Okay, next, talk about hypothesis. Hypothesis is a tentative statement about the relationship between two variables, and then here the researcher used two variables. The first is alternative hypothesis or HE, and the second is null hypothesis or HEO. Next, chapter 3. In chapter 3, there are research design, population and sample, and then the research instrument. Okay, talk about research design. In this research, I using ex post facto research design with the correlation design research. Therefore, ex post facto research is a method that is widely used and useful for researcher because it provides a lot of valuable information for decision making in the field of education. Okay, next, population and sample. The researcher decided to conduct the research toward the 8th grade student of SMPN 8 Denpasar in academic year 2024-2025. There are 9 classes of the 8th grade student of SMPN 8 Denpasar. Each class has a minimum of 32 students and maximum 34 students. The whole 8th grade student consists of 320 of students. Furthermore, 320 students will be considered as the population. In this research, the researcher used a cluster random sampling technique to determine the sample. Cluster random sampling technique in OCL, method of probability sampling that is often used to study particularly those are readily geographical dispersed. In cluster sampling, the researcher divided a population into smaller group known as a cluster. Okay, next talk about research instrument. The researcher will use the instrument which was considered appropriate to support the analysis in order to achieve the researcher objective in collecting the data. The instrument of the present study were in the form of a structured questionnaire and picture description. Okay, still in chapter 3, I want to talk about data collection. Um, Data will collect by giving motivation questionnaire and speaking skill assessment to 16 samples that have been selected by random sampling. Data is sent to the same day. Then the test consists of 30 questions for the motivation questionnaire and 30 pictures to describe monologue test for the speaking skill test. Okay, next talk about data analysis. Mm, Um, the researcher used questionnaire to measure student motivation and descriptive monologue test to measure student speaking ability. In analysis the data, the researcher will use some analysis using prerequisite analysis and hypothesis testing by using SPSS 26 version for Windows. I think this is all about my presentation. Thank you for your nice attention.